Hey, what's up, guys? It's Josh. Welcome to another episode of the Guns and Cameras podcast. We're down in Texas. We're at the Demolition Ranch Range Day, as you can hear behind me. I really think you're gonna like our next guest. He's an expert at everything that goes slow. I think he's around here somewhere, maybe.
What's going on, dude?
What's up, Bryce?
I heard you saying something about slow motion or something?
Yes, sir. Actually, I really think that people on the podcast will be interested in learning a little bit more about the complexities of what it is you do to capture those amazing shots.
Because your podcast, Guns and Cameras, I'll take the camera side of it all day long.
Sounds great. So, hey, guys, we're going to kick this episode off. So, shooters, are you ready? Stand by. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Guns and Cameras podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Best, and today we are joined with a very special guest, a man who shoots so fast, he makes everything look slow. Maybe you know who I'm talking about. We're talking about Mr. Bryce Fritzel, aka Fritzel3.14 on Instagram. You may also know him from a YouTube channel called Ballistic High Speed. Bryce, thank you for being on the show today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, like you could probably tell from the my username on Instagram, which is my really old personal one, 3.14. So physics, math, all that kind of stuff has been my background forever, basically. I think second grade, I was into astronomy and just veered off into physics from there. So, so I'm born and raised here in Indiana. Super boring out here, so you kind of have to find inventive ways to learn and have fun and grow a career, things like that. So it was always physics and science for me, and then I think the whole camera thing was just happenstance. I think it was just curiosity for the technology in general, just kind of, whether it's playing around with my dad's camera, whatever he had at the time, or whatever it is, and then it was really, and I feel like this is true for so many people, shows like Mythbusters, or there was another Discovery Channel show called Time Warp, where it was basically what Ballistic High Speed is now, but not so focused on firearms and things like that. So so it was an ever-expanding curiosity of science mixed with a more recent interest in the cinematography, camera work, things like that. So, but watching them integrate cameras into their research process on Mythbusters, and also just everything looks cooler in slow motion usually. So that was a pretty big compelling factor to kind of where I am today. So there's a whole lot of side steps from there to here, all sorts of things we could unpack if we want to, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Very cool. That's one thing I wanted to ask you about is the math that goes into high speed cameras, right? Because that's one thing that I don't know. I mean, for most videographers nowadays, if you're shooting like 4K 120, right? That is, not even close to the type of frame rates that you guys are shooting at with the Phantom cameras. And there's a lot of math that goes into, again, shutter speed and being able to, like, the scientific approach, physics approach to the importance of that. I was going to ask you, like, one of the questions I had was, how do you calculate your shutter speed given your frame rate when you're shooting that fast to get a sharp image, right?
Yeah, so, because it's not so much about sharpness on a resolution frame of reference. It's also sharpness with motion blur. So you have, spatial resolution and temporal resolution, and you always have to think about those things a lot when you're working with high speed. In fact, they rate their camera's speed by measuring what's essentially called throughput, which is your spatial resolution times your temporal resolution. So for instance, if you're just filming something like a human athlete or something, you typically don't need more than like 300, 500, maybe 1,000 frames per second. You can get some interesting footage. Think like broadcast slow-mo for the NFL or baseball or whatever it is. So that kind of stuff, your normal videography perspective can still kind of work for that because the time scales isn't hugely different. Although 1,000 frames per second is kind of where you're first stepping into a whole different way of measuring time. So like DSLRs and normal cameras, you're usually measuring in fractions of a second, like 1/60th, 120th, 1,000th, or whatever. So
Hmm.
when you start getting above 1,000 frames per second, you got to think in terms of milliseconds or microseconds or nanoseconds, just depending on which order of magnitude you're in for frame rate. So I'll say that like 85% of it is just experience on doing this stuff for so long. So
Yeah.
if somebody, if I get a client email, it was like, we're looking to image our new 5.56 ammunition, it's supposed to be about this, muzzle velocity. We want to watch it impact this. What do you recommend? And I can instinctively think, we're at least going to need this frame rate if our framing is this tight from this distance, and as long as we have enough light for this shutter speed, the motion blur on that bullet should almost disappear. So a lot of it's experience, but you can obviously calculate all
Hmm.
this stuff. So, something that moves, 1,000 feet per second, and you're going to film it, 1,000 times slower, it's going to turn to 1 foot per second, right? So then you can
Right.
think about if a bullet's moving 1 foot per second, what fraction of that do I need to get to before a length of that bullet is not going to traverse at some distance to create motion blur? So there's ways to think
Exactly.
through it. But typically in the world of high speed, especially in kind of what ballistic high speed is, which is very like we're trying to extract data and learn from it. So the more
Yep.
motion blur we can reduce, the better, and that's just
Right.
all lighting. So if you're filming standard cinematography rules, 180-degree shutter is usually, drilled into your brain from, very early on in your career that if you're filming
Yep.
24 frames per second, your shutter speed should be about 1/40th of a second, and that'll extrapolate up through your frame rates, right? Because it's the ratio. So
Yep.
we obviously that's our minimum. So if I'm filming 100,000 frames per second, I need my shutter speed ideally to be at least a 200,000th of a second for it to at least feel like fluid motion that doesn't have too much motion, right?
Yeah.
So then but then usually I try to push 90-degree shutter on most things that we image. Um,
Okay.
so 100,000 frames per second. Now you're approaching 500,000th of a second for a 90-degree shutter on that. So
Oh, crap, dude.
and there's a lot of things that help with that. Obviously, if you watch any of our videos, you'll notice we pretty much always film in direct sunlight
Yep.
as often as possible. There's a couple exceptions, like when we did fireworks at night, or a couple subjects didn't quite need extreme frame rates. So, if it's a little hazy, a little bit overcast, it's okay. Kind of smooths out the lighting anyways. Typically anything more than like 50,000 frames per second, it has to be direct sunlight. And even then, we have huge mirror bounces. I have 1400 watt LED with a reflector cone on it. And even then that's not enough.
No.
So like one specific example of a really problematic subject is tannerite,
Hmm.
which is one of the brightest things I've ever imaged. C4 obviously is a very, very, very bright thing. Usually any high energy explosion, high energy event is going to self illuminate so drastically that it doesn't even matter if you have direct sunlight.
Hmm.
So if you watch our episode on tannerite, this is just from memory. It could be wrong, but I want to say our shutter speed was maybe a couple hundred nanoseconds, which is billionths of a second for perspective. So we're like sub
Wow.
microsecond territory now. And then I had the lens stop down to either f16 or f22. And just then were we able to remove that saturated whiteness of the flame and see, it unfurling and all that stuff. And at that
Mm.
point, everything around it's pitch black. There's no information. So you could have filmed it at night and it wouldn't matter. So it's it's a constantly evolving challenge for us, but as we do it more and more, I can instinctively just recall settings that work for other stuff, and usually it works out. So
Yeah.
yeah, just a lot of experience and kind of mentally trying to figure that stuff out.
That stuff's crazy. I love that. How much of what you do is for entertainment versus like because you're available, like people can hire you to do projects, but how much of the stuff that you're doing outside of the YouTube entertainment world is like contracted for R&D or research purposes versus just entertainment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, ever since 2020, 2021. So really, it was acquisition of the equipment that can do it.
Hmm.
So for instance, this camera was my first entry into the ultra high speed world. Where's the V711? I
Cool.
got that basically shortly after COVID started,
Hmm.
which really wasn't a smart decision, but it ended up being a very smart decision. So that was the first camera that I got that I felt comfortable could capture firearms, explosives to some degree.
Okay.
Before that, I had some of the older Miro Phantoms and ones that could shoot, like 1080p high quality stuff, but maybe a couple thousand frames per second, which is great for commercial stuff. So before any of this stuff, I was pretty heavily into commercial advertising, shooting advertisements, that kind of stuff. So like
Hmm.
tabletop food photography, or I do a lot of work for a coffee company. So like I'll put like if they want to advertise a new flavor, I'll put like a firework inside of the bag. So as it explodes, I have the ingredients coming out of the bag. So like, you know, like the Flex camera here, which is known for high definition, high speed filming. So that kind of stuff I did for many years. And then once I got the 711, that's where I kind of started branching into I can capture supersonic things pretty well now. So it kind of slowly ramped in from there. The thing that really pivoted my career was, I think it was like summer of 2021. My my buddy Adam that I do the channel with,
Hmm.
he and I were like casually friends on Facebook, I think, and we had met each other a couple times, but that was it. So once I got that camera, I was interested in trying to film some firearms. I didn't know which ones. I didn't really know the differences. I grew up kind of around guns, and we can get into that conversation too. I just knew that if I'm gonna start getting clients for this, I need to know what I'm doing when it comes to firearms and that kind of stuff. So asked him if could shoot some stuff on his property out in the country because he had firearms, and so we went out there, and I think the first video was just like shooting fruit, like just silly stuff, just so I can get acquainted with like what different muzzle velocities do for different frame rates. And then the same day we did another video that was basically a comparison of muzzle exits for different guns, starting with like a
Okay.
22 handgun all the way up to like suppressed. What did we do? Suppressed probably 308 and something else, or 300 blackout, I think. So, but
Cool.
it was like 15 different guns, pistols, shotguns, rifles, all tiled really nicely, clean white background, 100,000 frames per second, with some cool sound design thrown in there and stuff. And for the last 10 years, anytime I ever did high speed content, I would edit it, put it up on Facebook, Instagram. Nobody really gave a damn, but I did. So, occasionally it would get, a few hundred views or maybe a couple thousand or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I guess for some perspective, like my Instagram maybe had like 600 followers, and Facebook was just friends and family or whatever. I would just post stuff because I found it interesting. And so I posted that video of the muzzle exits on Facebook and on Instagram, and it was like overnight multi-million views. So, which was super weird to me because I didn't.
What is what is it? Can I ask what does that feel like waking up to that, right?
Um,
Like going from nobody really paying attention till you post one and all of a sudden it's just like taking off. What is that? What's your reaction to
well,
something like
I
that?
typically try to be a fairly like level-headed, tame person in terms of expectations. So when it was first happening, it was like, how you have your phone on and then you set it down and like 10 seconds later the screen will dim or whatever.
Hmm.
For like hours it wouldn't self-dim because notifications just kept rolling in, which at first is really cool because it's like somebody finally cares about the last 10 years of my efforts and learning and experience,
Right.
putting, I guess, a solid video together. So I thought, I might get, 5-figure views, maybe low 6-figure views. I don't know. Overnight, I'll wake up and it'll be simmered off, and then the next day was even more intense. So, so I want to say, well, if you were into guns at all back in 2021, you probably saw the video like 8 times at least
Hmm.
because it was all over TikTok, it was all over Facebook. re-downloaded, re-shared to the point where it was all like pixelated and compressed. I'm like, come on, guys, at least share the original. And that's when I learned one of my hardest lessons, which was to have some way of it being connected back to you in terms of whether it's a watermark or, something
Yeah.
like that. So I want to say total on the internet, it was probably in the, many tens of millions, if not low hundreds of millions of views. Just every time I saw a new upload, it was like 30 million there, 60 million there. And
Dang.
so it was just wild. And I remember, and I'm trying to absorb it, thinking about like, what do I do with this? Is this just going to be a one-off thing? Because now I've gone from 600 followers to like 6,000 followers in a day. So it ended up being a conversation with Adam that was, well, A, why do we think this happened? And B, what do we do with it? And I think within a couple days, we kind of decided that there must be some sort of hyper-specific niche in both the camera world and the gun world, which is dedicated high-speed imaging of firearms, ballistics, explosives, but presented in a little more fun way than just, I don't know, the History Channel or, some sort of a little bit more dry, here's the data kind of approach. So we kind of wanted to blend some of our personal favorite shows like Mythbusters and Time Warp, but obviously Slow Mo Guys is a really big point of reference there. And Adam had a couple different channels on his side as well. So we were trying to figure out how can we combine what we already know and what we already have technology-wise and deliver on this niche. And the first few episodes were definitely rough because it was just like, what would be crazy to do in slow-mo? So our first episode was a 50 API round going through a ballistic head. And we just wanted to start off with a bang, which I guess technically we literally did. And so it was, but like I said earlier, that was the flipping point in my career because now suddenly I'm being referred to as the person that images firearms and stuff in high speed. Obviously, it wasn't like an instant flip in the career, but like that's kind of like where the curve changes drastically. And so I very slowly started weaning off of stuff that the flex might be used for, like the commercials and the advertisements. I still do that stuff, but there's definitely a lot more. I feel like I use my brain more, my original passion in physics when I'm doing the ultra high speed stuff. So I just feel that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing a little bit more when I'm doing that stuff. And also there's just a lot more money in ballistics and engineering and R&D and, occasional military government contracts, like as far into that sector as I can go. So, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, man, that's wild. That's wild. Because I can think back, I remember when the Slow Mo Guys stuff started coming out, and until I think I heard of your guys' channel, there wasn't really anybody else that was doing like the high speed stuff. Like Slow Mo Guys they were doing, early on like the water balloon popping and the pyro stuff, right? But then up until you guys started kind of taking the ballistic high speed stuff and turning it into less scientific, more entertainment. Because there was like I think a couple of videos that were floating around that were like really old school, grainy, like bullets flying into stuff and fragmenting and whatever. But until you guys started producing content, I don't know that there was anybody else
There
that was doing
were. I can maybe think of two channels that kind of did it. One being Smarter Every Day. He owns a couple Phantoms and he's done plenty of firearm episodes, definitely. And then this goes definitely further back into YouTube, but Richard Ryan with Rated RR and Full Mag, and he might have had even another channel other than that. And I finally got to meet him down in Texas at one of the Creator Range Days last year, which is,
Nice.
or no, maybe beginning of this year, which is pretty cool. But those were, like, Richard Ryan stuff, I don't want to say was short-lived, but it was so early on that I don't think, like, he was on the cusp of the high-speed stuff, like the Phantom 2512. He even got to experiment with some of the Shimatsu cameras, which were like 5-10 million frames per second. He got to do some of that stuff, but I think he just had so many other interests as well. Like now, if you look at his stuff, it's like miniguns on Teslas and things like that, which is still really cool. But you're right that the only high-speed dedicated channel out there was pretty much Slow Mo Guys. I think there's another one, maybe Legendary Shots or something, but I think that was like a spin-off of an older channel, and they just happened to have the cameras. I'm not too sure, but pretty much Slow Mo Guys is the only other channel I can think of.
Yeah, but when you're talking like the scope, the magnitude, the size of creators on YouTube, having only a handful of guys doing it,
Yeah,
like you were saying, hyper niche, right?
yeah.
Like,
So that, which was a huge surprise to us, because I think I posed it to Adam as a question on like, is this a niche that needs filling? And that seemed like a silly question, because how could you not combine high-speed cameras and firearms to make content out of it? So I think we spent some time scouring through YouTube. Like, there has to be channels doing this already, because like, how could you not? And and I think a lot of it comes down to my you kind of have to be mildly obsessed with high speed in order to buy them.
oh yeah,
It's not common to rent them, at least not consistently enough to make a channel out of it. Because like, if you asked Vision Research to rent this camera for a week, it's probably 12 grand, right?
yeah,
So I think that was the only thing that was, I don't know if it was an advantage, but it was the only way that put us in that niche in a way that we could do it, was because ever since like 2014 or so, when I got my first Phantom, a really cheap used one, and just kind of kept, building up, trading and saving and getting refurbished ones and looking for the best deals and just working as much as I can. That sort of like pressure on myself to try to fit into this industry by brute force, I think, is the only thing that actually gave us some sort of edge there. And
yeah.
and Adam is also a really smart person in his own sectors, because like machining and robotics and gunsmithing and all of that stuff. Like, I'm sure you've seen our episode of colliding two bullets together.
Yep.
That was all of that hardware was him, the programming, the software. And like, it seems rudimentary, the stuff that we used, like it wasn't some big contraption, but that was like Adam knowing we don't need more than this. So I would supply him with physics calculations, and he would come back with prototypes, and over the course of a year we just back and forth and did it. So it feels like a modern Mythbusters with way less budget, which I think I said on that episode. But I don't know, the dynamic is great, and we both feel like we're using our brains in the way that we always wanted to, which I love.
Nice. Yeah, I love that you guys don't overthink it, right? It's like there's a lot of practicality, and I think that's a big attributing factor to why your guys' channel has had so much success, is because there is this, it's a very practical approach to high speed stuff. And again, if people don't know, like you're saying, you do have to have a love for it just because of the expense, right? I mean, that's a big turnoff. If you don't really love the math and the physics behind what high speed is capable of doing, you're not going to invest thousands of dollars into the machines that can capture it, right? So
Yeah, well, a couple orders of magnitude more than that, but yeah.
yeah,
But I mean, like, for some context, like this camera, when it first came out, and even for a while, the pricing on that, you'd have to choose between getting a house or getting that camera.
yep,
And it's the reason I don't own a house yet. So it was, I mean, this is like any sort of person in a creative industry, and I'm sure you totally get it, but like in your first few years, you have to choose, am I going to be willing to work for not very much in this creative space, plan on my, not having as many groceries as I probably should, not as many pairs of shoes as my other friends, kind of thing, but knowing that someday in the future this is gonna all pan out, and I'm finally on the cusp of the last 12 years of thinking that way.
right on.
But yeah, the high speed has to be an obsession, basically, for it to work out as a lucrative career.
No kidding. Well, and I imagine, like, if you're running that camera, like how many I mean, you know it now because again, you've been doing it for so long, but when you're first starting out, right, you run, every time you hit record on one of those cameras, you're capturing huge amounts of information very
Immense, yeah.
fast, right? And how many times did you miss, right? Where maybe you're like out of focus a little bit and you have to shoot it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, dude, good for you, man. And thank you, because we're all, we get to enjoy the successes of your efforts, or
Yeah,
the fruits
and
of your efforts.
it's a fairly difficult thing to navigate, because like Adam and I had a discussion at the beginning of the channel where we were going to set ground rules for ourselves. So like if the channel got way too big too fast, we need to keep ourselves chained to this original premise, or if it takes longer than we think, at what point do we consider it not worth it anymore, if that's even a thought, and what sort of character do we want to maintain throughout our channel. And another thing that we didn't overthink was to literally just be ourselves. And if you're ever on set with us, you'll find that off camera and on camera it's a pretty similar vibe. We didn't want, and no diss to any of the channels that do, but we don't do any of the like rehearsed skits or any of that stuff, because it just, I don't know, like I don't feel like I should have to act a thing for you to pay attention, or like, and I don't know if this is a whole conversation about like attention spans and TikTok and all that stuff, but I don't know. We wanted to give a genuine approach to something that could be fun and scientific and safe, and just present it to whoever wants it. And thankfully, we've been scooping up a large audience of people who appreciate it, but I think what you'll find is the larger audience you get, the fraction stays the same of people that think they know how you should run your channel, even though they've never made content a day in their life, So that was also a little bit of a hurdle too mentally, was to just remember that we started this making content that we want to watch. Most of our episodes, as soon as I get done editing it, I want to bring it downstairs to my big 77-inch 4K surround sound OLED, all that good stuff, and just watch it with all the sound design layering I just did. Because we shoot, all the normal camera stuff is at least 4K. We shoot like with a red cinema camera, or the Canon C70, stuff like that. And so we try to color grade and upscale stuff to look as beautiful as possible. So if we make an episode where I don't feel excited to watch it in all its glory, then we probably should have thought a little bit more about that episode, or something like that. So and we're only like 60 episodes in, so it's still evolving. But yeah, like episodes like the Bullet Collision and the most recent with Houston Jones, the Tungsten Cube, those two stick out to me as what we feel like our prime is, because, and I think the biggest distinction is we had another friend of ours on camera work, which relieved me of the mental capacity of worrying about looking at something through a camera, interacting with Adam, trying to get both of our characters on screen, and thinking about high-speed stuff while I'm working with this, and it doesn't quite vibe as well. Obviously, we built our channel on doing that, but as soon as we did that, then it was like, this feels like someday this could be on Discovery, or it just has that kind of vibe where Adam and I can focus on what we enjoy doing. There's more interaction, more dynamic, all that stuff. So that's hopefully where the channel is headed. Obviously, as we get bigger, there's going to be more expenses and more things to worry about, whether it's employees or, because it's already a dual partnership LLC. Like it's growing pretty quick. But but back to what I was saying, which was we set some of those ground rules for ourselves. So even now, when we feel a ton more comfortable on camera, we're still being exactly ourselves, which
That's awesome.
So like we want to make sure that the audience we're curating only expects us to be ourselves and not some character or something else.
Yeah, no, that's a very smart approach. So if y'all are watching this and you want to start a YouTube channel or get into it,
Just be yourself.
take this advice, because this is the best way to do it. Let's go back a little bit. So let's talk about guns, right? So you mentioned before that you'd had grown up around or had some familiarity with guns, but there was like, let's go back to how did that kind of end up being your niche, right? Because you had that thought, you said you had that thought, I'm going to reach out to Adam because he's a gun guy, right? Or has the property. But when it kind of in your career or your life, I guess, did guns kind of start becoming something you were more familiar with?
I think it's just a natural byproduct of my brain's curiosity to understand something and appreciate it. So like I said, my original passion was basically science and physics. And then as soon as I tried something with cameras, I wanted to understand it deeply. And so before too long, It's like, what is chroma subsampling and bit rate and compression artifacts and like, resolution versus dynamic range, and like that's stuff I didn't even think about a year ago, and now it's becoming a second part of my career. So now I'm, being DP on short film sets, and these, I've been on one like medium-ish budget movie from Hollywood that came out to Indiana to film. So like,
Nice.
and so there's so many times where I'm just sitting there like I thought I would be like an astrophysicist or something, and here I am, doing this. So, but I think that's how my brain naturally worked with new interests like that. So as soon as we filmed that first video with guns, I just thought they would be an interesting topic for high speed because they move so darn fast.
Right.
And then as we started the channel, and I'll have to think back, but I don't think I even owned my own personal gun yet. It was either very close to that video, shortly before, shortly after, but like right around that time, I didn't even own a gun yet. So,
How about now?
well, us as a channel, we own a lot. But we could talk about what guns I own now, but in terms of how the interest flourished from it was, I think, watching how guns operate, being able to describe, the flame fronts that, are on the back side and the front side of a bullet, and measuring the angle of the Mach cone, and, toroidal vortex that you see more often with this gun versus this, and dwell time measurements, and, just like my knowledge of firearms is so rooted in an engineering application. I wasn't swayed by the whole like 9mm versus 45 or Glock versus SIG or all the stuff that people get so hung up on forever just because, they grew up arguing about that stuff. It's like Ford versus Chevy or whatever it is. Like that was zero part of my beginning interest in firearms. So it's like I just want to learn about the thing, which is firearms.
Yeah.
Now, as I use more guns, I definitely have developed preferences for some stuff and know how to understand what is quality machining for a firearm versus not, and brands to maybe avoid and that kind of stuff. But but I think it tapped into that. I want to understand this as much as possible, and then you kind of just. But it's also like in combination with like Second Amendment and stuff like that. It's like I also believe in, like here in Indiana, we have the castle doctrine. So like I believe in protecting myself and my family, and I also now appreciate this stuff from a mechanical perspective. I think it's time to start owning guns, So it just all kind of evolved from there.
Cool.
And then like as another quick example, like I was never really a car guy. Like I probably had like a Ford Focus for a while or an Escape or something. And then I started getting a little bit more involved in learning about that kind of mechanical stuff from my dad. And then I was just like, you know what, my career's doing well, I'm just gonna buy a nice car. I've always wanted a Camaro. So I got a Camaro like 3 years ago. Right. And I went from, I know how to change my oil and that's about it, to now it's like, I understand how, boosting your engine works, and ignition timing, and direct injection versus port injection, and, centrifugal superchargers versus turbos and all that stuff. And it's like, I can now pretty much take apart my engine, put it back together, whatever mechanical stuff I need to do. And so it's like, as soon as I have an interest, it's like, I'm just going to dive really deep into that. And incidentally, all my hobbies are incredibly expensive. So that's not been fun.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yes, that's kind of how that's been working. But as far as guns, so I personally don't own many, and it's because I don't have to, because our channel assembles so many of them. So like, standard Glock 9mm, had that for a while. I think it's a Gen 4 or Gen 3 Glock 19. That's like a everyday carry kind of thing. But as my more fun gun, SIG P220.
Nice.
This is just like if I want to, put some damage into something, that's what I'm going to do. And so the reason why I love 45 caliber so much is because it's such a fat, slow bullet. It's perfect for high speed. So I can get, like I don't have to, like you're probably used to this with some cameras. If you want to film higher speed, you have to drop the resolution, which is very true for high-speed cameras. So let's say 50,000 frames per second versus 100,000, it might be a 2x crop. Usually that's not linear for most Phantom cameras, but that's basically what you'd expect. So I might need 100,000 frames per second to capture a rifle bullet, but a 45, I could do like 30,000. And on this camera, that's high definition, 30,000 frames a second, and the bullet's still fairly slow. So it's like, it feels like a cheat code to get high-speed imaging of a bullet if you use a 45 or maybe like a 38 special or just some really slow bullet.
Nice.
But those are, and I think I have an old like revolver somewhere. But as our channel's grown, one of the companies we work with, Leviathan Defense, they sent me personally a gun, which is called their Valhalla, which is a 5.56 223.
Nice.
I've got the nice Ballistic high-speed logo on the desk
There
cover
you go.
there.
Nice.
So this has been fun. So this is my first entry into learning about optics and red dots and green dots and accessories and all that stuff. So this I just got within the last few months. So
Cool.
this has been my new well, now I got to learn about rifles and all that stuff. So I take this out to Adam sometimes, and he was in the military for a while, and so anytime I want to learn something about a new gun or something, he'll have no problem teaching me about it. I'll just go, from ammunition from our sponsors, just go dump a bunch of lead into his backstop, and yeah, and then I've got like a Remington 870 shotgun or something like that.
Sweet.
So yeah, everything else on the channel probably has 20 different guns now, and more recently we've been getting some really nice ones, like the Tippmann Armory. They've got their Gatling gun, like the 9mm, the 22, belt fed. We have a couple guns from Terran Tactical, like their Harbinger and the Pit Viper. We recently got a really nice 8.6 rifle, and like just imaging the bullet exiting an 8.6 barrel is so intense, because I think I calculated the twist rate to like 500,000 RPM or something. Like it spins rapid. And it almost looks like CGI coming out, because it's like it's spinning faster than it's moving laterally. And it's just like, are we sure this is reality? So, and that's just one of those things where I had a fresh palette coming into firearms. So learning, like I had no idea what an 8.6 bullet was. Like, what does that even mean? I know the 8.6 is the dimension, the diameter of the bullet, but what does that mean? Mm-hmm. So I immediately get to discover exactly what this bullet is by watching it exit a barrel. I can calculate exact velocities from the high-speed software. I can watch the twist rate. I can see how much powder gets ahead of it. I can see what kind of shot cone it's creating. I can see how it breaks apart into material. So it's just like, I feel like Adam and I have been, not accidentally, but slowly evolving our brains into just understanding ballistics so innately that there are companies that will approach us with an idea, and usually we can pretty quickly say yes or no, of either that's not going to work or that's just not going to look good in high speed. And it's just because it's like we're wiring our brains for physics of bullets and what they do and stuff. And because like we've done, I don't want to say most experiments you can do, but like a lot of different bullets into a lot of different materials over the last 3 years, and it's just kind of building a database in your brain of what stuff can do.
All right, guys, we're halfway through this week's episode, and that means it's time to tell you that it's been brought to you by 1156 Productions and by
Tokens of Valor.
Tokens of Valor is my side hustle where I take ballistic parts, brass, copper, and sterling silver, and I turn them into one-of-a-kind hand-forged wearables for both men and women. If you're interested, Bryce, let me know and I'll make something.
That sounds
for
pretty
you.
cool. I was gonna
It'd be
say I
actually
want some of
kinda
that.
cool. So I'll make something for you. If you're interested, just find me on Instagram. It's at Tokens of Valor. Send me a DM and we'll get something started for you. All right, we're halfway through. We got a lot more awesome stuff coming with Bryce, talking about slow motion and high-speed filming. I think you're gonna love it, so let's get back into the episode.
I think that firearms are like the original physics problem.
Yeah.
Right. Because like I've been watching, because I was going to be a mechanical engineer, made 2 years into the mechanical engineering program, thought I was going to build drones, decided I didn't want to be an engineer. After I got to like Calc 6 and higher level physics, I was like, dude, don't get me wrong, I love it, right? I love physics. I love applied mathematics. I think it's awesome. But you look at firearms, right? Because I've just started watching, I think History Channel put out like the history of the fire. It's an old series, right? But I started watching that through. And it's like you have the original like chemistry, right? The Chinese, figuring out the formula for gunpowder, and then right away it's into rockets, and then all of a sudden it's into, very rudimentary firearms, all the way up to now, where again, not only do you have, you know, some of the like the machining and the metalworking, and just even some of the firearms, like I think, what is it? Is it like the P90 or whatever, or some of those more that have the bullet sideways in the magazine, and it has to rotate before it gets fed into the chamber. Some of those complex problems that need to be solved.
Or like some of the self-ballasting guns, like the Vector, I think.
Yeah, like the Vector.
The way its center of mass shifts as it recoils, it's a lot of physics and engineering that
Right.
have been solved by people much smarter than me.
Right. And a lot of what I love, one of the things I really appreciate is how like some of the designs we have now are just improvements on designs that were from like the 1890s, 1870s, right?
Which
'Cause
is
those
it's funny that you bring that up, because the episode I'm editing right now is flintlocks.
Right
So
on.
we've been able to see exactly how far things have come from older, like the 3F, 4F powders and things like that, all the way up to modern smokeless powders and things like that.
Yeah, that's gonna be cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that one. So moving on, let's see. What's in your camera bag right now? What do you pack around with you on a daily basis?
So I don't actually have camera bags anymore. They're all Pelican cases. But so I own too many cameras.
Yep.
Currently, I have 5 Phantoms,
Wow.
and they all have their own specific industry and thing that they fit into, like the Flex camera, the V711, the VO640S, the VO1310S, and then the 2512. It's basically a not so slow, really good quality all the way to extremely fast, sub-microsecond. Not the best quality, but who cares when you're almost watching light move, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of Phantom cameras. Like I said earlier, ballistic high speed, and then also some of my personal commercial work that I do. I shoot a lot on, I have a Red Raven. I'm thinking about getting the Red Gemini, because that sensor is so delicious. But frankly, it's one of those things where it'd be a little overkill for my creative work. These are not overkill for my, channel work.
Yeah.
And then I have, Canon C70. That one is a beautiful run-in gun camera. Excellent face tracking autofocus, built-in ND filters, kind of slow-mo options if you need it, but I don't really use it for that. And then I used to do a lot of photography work, 1DX Mark II Canon. Like some of the, at this point, DSLRs are like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I probably have 15 to 20 different Canon lenses. Pretty much, I don't think I've owned another brand. EF mount, I should say.
Yeah.
Like I've
I
got
was gonna
Sigma
ask what you do
lenses,
for-
things like
what
that.
you
But
do
like,
for glass on those, but
yeah. But as I've started to film more and more dangerous things like C4 and RDX and det cord and things like that, I've had to solve the danger problem one of two ways, which is to either protect the cameras directly or to space them more. And I find that it's difficult to find ballistic rated glass or polycarbonate that doesn't skew your image just enough that it doesn't look good to me. So it's a lot of, getting lenses like this, 400 2.8, or this is one of my favorite versatile lenses. That's the 200 f2. And this camera, believe it or not, is a full frame sensor. And it's a 1 megapixel sensor. So if you can imagine 720p on a full frame sensor, those pixels are huge. So this camera just absorbs light. I think its native or base ISO is either 6400 or 8000. That's where it starts. Which is a whole other conversation on like how do you even image some of this stuff and it's just because sensor technology, vision research has pushed so far. They have their own personal sensor company, I believe, at this point out in California, that they basically say, we need a sensor to do this, this, and this. This is how we think we're going to do it. And so I've learned a lot from talking to some of their chief applications engineer on like quantum efficiency and their new backside illuminated sensor technology and full well capacity and dynamic range, and just so much that you didn't even know was like, how do you convert a photon into an electron? Like how does that really happen? Like you can say it, but how does it work? That kind of stuff. But it's a lot of trying to be as versatile as possible, especially if I'm going to be a freelance high-speed technician, so to speak. So if a company is like just yesterday, I got a call that was, we have a hypervelocity microscopic jet of droplets that we need to capture with basically no motion blur, which I'm sure you can imagine already is going to be hard because I'm going to need like a 2x, if not 5x, if not 10x macro lens, which is going to have a horrible aperture wide open. We calculated with the droplet size that ideally we need to film 200,000 frames per second.
Dang.
And probably like a 45-degree shutter through a macro lens with a cramped space that's inside, so I can't use the sun. So it's going to have to be like, a few thousand at least watts of flicker-free, because that's another thing. Not all LEDs are flicker-free. Some LEDs are flicker-free up to a certain frame rate, and then they start flickering. Like I have one that is perfectly clean until 15,000 frames per second. Then it starts to flicker. And you would never know that. And they probably advertise it as flicker-free.
Yeah, probably. And that flicker probably for you in that amount of time is like it's all black, right?
Oh, it's basically completely off, then on, then off, then on.
Yeah.
So it's not like, tungsten bulbs where the filament is like oscillating. It's like off, on, off, which is another thing we could maybe talk about in a bit, is the whole like how slow your brain is and persistence of vision. That's usually a pretty good topic to talk about.
I think that in that you just explained why the niche is so small.
Yeah,
Right.
because this is stuff I'm still learning about. But like being versatile in this industry is being able to capture things that are both microscopic and hypervelocity with almost no context heading in to the scenery, because it's all heavily NDA'd and that kind of stuff. So it's like, I don't even know how to prepare for this. So I just need to have more than enough light, plenty of lens options, different camera bodies with different capabilities, and just, do the best. And then other times it's like, we need to blow up a 8 feet long slab of concrete with this explosive and watch the fractures in the debris field from 2 different angles. But the shrapnel is going to be, this speed at this range, so no cameras within this distance. It's like, well, now I'm going to need an 800 mil lens with a 2x teleconverter, and I probably can't use that one because the sensor's so big. I don't get any crop factor to help me out, so I might have to use a different camera, but now I don't have the speeds of that camera, so it's like, what's more important? And then there's the whole triggering problem, because thankfully high-speed cameras have gotten better. For instance, like my first high-speed camera was maybe like a 4 gigabyte RAM. So if you're filming a couple thousand frames per second, you get like half a second to trigger that. Right. And if anyone watching doesn't understand how high-speed cameras usually operate, is they have a RAM partition that constantly buffers, like think of a dash cam. You could have it recording forever, and once it fills the SD card, the oldest stuff gets deleted while it records new stuff. It's the same thing with the high-speed cameras, but it's doing it on a per-frame basis. So then, as cameras got 8 gigabytes, and then these 2 cameras have 32 gigabytes. One of my newest cameras, the VO640, is 72 gigabytes. That camera is 288 gigabytes, and then the new TMX series 7510, there's an option for half a terabyte, 512 gigabytes. And you think that's going to give you a ton of record time until you remember that the speeds are also increasing at about the same rate. So a full speed shot on one of these cameras, I maybe get 2 or 3 seconds, which is usually enough time if you just need to capture a detonation or a bullet impact. as long as you can react to the impact or the sound within 2 or 3 seconds, really easy. Usually you can get it. This camera full speed, I actually get like 8 seconds. So this camera just absolutely rips through data, but it's got, you know, 1/4 of a terabyte of data. So, but what that means is every time I record a shot, I now have 288 gigabytes to deal with.
Right.
So that's a problem they solved with something called the CineMag, which is, this is one of the newer ones. Well, there's a newer one than this now too. But this is 2 terabytes. And you might think this is pretty big for 2 terabytes because you can get like SD cards that are a terabyte, until you realize that all of those pins there individually carry a lot of data. So I'm trying to remember the read speed. It might be like 6 gigabits per second. It's probably more. It's got to be more. But like it just dumps data on there. But because it's holding the shot in RAM, which is volatile memory, I instantly have access to that full recording. So I can sift through, trim it, decide what part I care about, so that 288 gigs might become 30. And then I can shoot that into the CineMag, and that'll store it there in solid state memory until I get back to the computer and can download it and everything. So
Crazy.
and that, in relation to the history of high-speed cameras, is a very portable, fast workflow. If you've ever worked with some of the older high-speed cameras, like what Mythbusters were using in the first few seasons, it was like you'd record it and then you'd have to wait like 45 minutes for it to slowly trickle that data through like Ethernet or something before you could even look at it.
Man.
And even then, you know, like think about if you're filming thousands of frames per second for a few seconds, you've got many minutes of footage to sift through. And that only gets worse when you're filming 1,000,000 frames per second for 8 seconds, right?
Yeah.
That's
That's
like days of footage.
I was gonna say, yeah, when you get that back to watching it back in slow motion, how much time do you have there? I mean, that's 8 seconds is.
It can, so think of it this way. I can do some, so like if you're filming, so our playback rate on our channel is 24 frames per second. So if we film 24,000 frames per second, that's a factor of 1,000, right? So if we are filming for 8 seconds for that RAM, that 8 seconds has now stretched to 8,000 seconds, right? But it goes way up from there. So another order of magnitude, if we want to film 240,000 frames per second, we're now stretching time out 10,000 times.
Yes.
And then, so this camera will max out at 1,000,000 frames per second. So, you know, another 4 times on top of that. So instead of 10,000, it's 40,000 times. So if you've got, and the record time also goes up to probably 20 seconds when you're at that frame rate. So, you know, 20 seconds times 40,000 is 800,000 seconds, right? So divide that by 60, you get 13,000 minutes divided by 60 again. That's 222 hours of footage, which is almost 10 days.
Holy crap.
And it's just all stored right there instantly, ready, which also brings up another very, very niche problem with high speed. It's come up a couple times on the channel, which is if we're filming something like Tannerite, where 99.9% of that footage is pitch black, and then an explosion for maybe 10, 15 seconds, and then back to the other 220 hours of black footage, you're scrubbing through 222 hours of black footage with a thumb wheel,
looking for
it. And every time you scroll, it's like one little click on the timeline on the camera screen is like an hour and a half. So, so there's a lot of creative ways to try to solve that problem, but it's stuff that people just wouldn't even think about as being a problem.
Not when you load up YouTube and you're like ballistic high speed and you're like, whoa, that was sweet. You know,
you don't see the 2 hours that it took me to find that, trim it, save it, color grade it, upscale it, sound design it, all that stuff, just for someone to say like, I would have done it different. You know what I mean?
Right. No kidding, right? Somebody in the keyboard warriors that are like, wah.
It's like, why didn't you do this frame rate?
You do it, man.
Yeah.
Like you can do this.
I would love for another channel to do this. No one does it.
Dude, you could make a whole nother channel that just explains the behind the scenes of what it takes to capture that. And especially if
Yeah.
you're doing multiple angles, right? Because you're almost probably not, when you have one of those moments, it's not like you're just rolling one all the time, right? You probably have multiple cameras, multiple
Yeah.
angles.
I think the most I've ever run at once, high speed wise, is 3.
Yeah.
Which it gets fun to, because like each camera, like I said, has its own purpose. So the flex is almost always like 1080p, 3000 frames per second or whatever, which is a nice beauty shot of like debris and shrapnel, and maybe you get a glimpse of the shockwave or whatever. And then, you know, maybe punch into 720p at, you know, 30,000 or 20,000 frames per second to see this other event. And then from another angle, maybe I'll hit 100,000 frames per second. So you get to witness it in different ratios of speed and quality from different angles, and it just kind of helps you wrap your brain around exactly what's going on. And it probably, you'd be able to make 3D simulations, I feel like, from the data we collect from all these perspectives.
Probably. Holy smokes. There you go, guys. Are you not entertained, right? All for your viewing pleasure, my friends.
But yeah,
Be sure to tell Bryce how much you appreciate him, because
which is why our shoots take so long.
Yeah.
Which is like, we've had friends of ours like say like, hey, can we come by and watch an episode get filmed? It's like, you can, but you're not gonna like it. And this just happened with the Flintlock episode, because like we didn't even have one of the Flintlocks until we were there that morning, because someone was bringing it.
Gotcha.
And he had his kid with him, and his kid was curious about, like, you know, maybe he wanted to be a YouTuber. He was curious about how it was going to go. And it's like, all right, well, you're going to be here a while before the first bullet even gets fired. And because, like, we'll get the stuff, Adam and I will quickly brainstorm on, like, okay, structure of the video needs to change a little bit. Let's maybe try it like this. Let's brainstorm a quick intro. Let's decide on what the viewer's even going to care about. Film the intro. And then we got to brainstorm on, like, how many cameras are we going to do? From what angles? What's going to be safe? What's going to be interesting? What's going to, you know, what questions are we asking? How are we going to answer it? How can we do it visually so we don't have to explain so much? And then once we've decided that, then it's what camera goes where. And then there's lens choices, frame rate choices, resolution, shutter speed, aperture, just the technical stuff. And then it all needs to be tethered to each other with BNC cables for triggering. Mm-hmm. And then maybe 2 or 3 hours in, we've shot our first bullet. And then it's, well, let me go around to all the high speed, make sure everything is saved, because if we trip over a power cable and power's lost, you'll lose everything that was in the RAM. Right. So before we even can run up and examine, you know, the head that just got shot to see what happened to it, we got to be like, all right, let me go save high speed first. I'll go trim stuff, save stuff. And I'm trying to not like watch it as I'm saving it, because I want to review it for the first time with Adam to get genuine, you know, reactions to it. So then once all that's saved, then I got to pick up the other camera, go up there with Adam, see what happened, discuss it. And then we go look at the high speed. And it's like 1 bullet per 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. And it's because we have our expression on set is high speed, high standards. So as much as we want to rush into the next exciting event, we need to make sure we're covering, even if it gets cut, we need to make sure we're covering about as much as we can. And so like for the Flintlock episode, we want to start looking at the pan on the Flintlock. We want to see, like, how does it spark? How long does it take to ignite? What is that dwell time? How does it compare to a modern gun? Which was a really fun experiment. And spoiler alert, it takes a lot longer than a modern gun. So like it's like 2 orders of magnitude slower. So like we're just like getting cool shots of the flint going, the powder igniting, how long it takes for the second charge to go and shoot the bullet out, and then we're getting that from different angles, and then loading of Flintlock takes a little bit, because you got to measure out your powder, ram it down there, you know, get your 4F powder and all that stuff. And we still hadn't shot a target yet, and we're like, you know, it's like noon, you know what I mean? And we've all been there since like, you know, 8:30 a.m. probably. And so it's like, but like, we know that there's, in this case, people kind of waiting to see something exciting, but we can't sacrifice the integrity of our episode. Right. So it's like I told you, this is going to take a while. And then so now we're comparing muzzle velocities of, like, if you add more powder, does your velocity increase for black powder based guns, and at what point do you reach an asymptote? You might appreciate that word. Adam didn't know what that was. And we discovered pretty much exactly what that was and how it tapers off and all that stuff. And, you know, shooting like Mythbuster style in front of a white board with, you know, every 6 inches a black line, and measuring with, you know, basically microseconds what's the exact velocity of the pistol versus the rifle, and then the different powder loads in the rifle. We're trying to be as methodical and interesting as possible because we want all of our episodes to have the scientific side and then the fun side. And then right after we did that, it's like, so I can calculate the kinetic energy of this round, but that does nothing if you can't watch it do something. So then you might shoot like a gallon jug of water or something, because now you can see the built up kinetic energy when that transfers into a different medium. What does that look like? And then we were shooting like zombie heads with the green and everything, and shooting into a gel block to see penetration depth and stuff like that. So it probably wasn't until 3 p.m. that we shot something interesting. And
that's a long day for people waiting to be entertained on the set, man.
Right. And every time we do it, it's like, man, this stuff takes a while. But it's like, you know, we didn't amass almost 900,000 subscribers in 3 years for not doing that. You know what I mean? So it's so we always say to each other, like, when it's 95 degrees out, we're sweating and sunburnt, we're just like high speed, high standards, and we get right back into it. So and now we're heading into winter soon, so it's going to be the same thing, just on the opposite side of the spectrum. So it's a lot.
Wow, dude, that's so crazy. We are at an hour, so I could talk to you all night long because this stuff is fascinating to me. But for the sake of moving on, so one of the big questions that I ask everybody on the show is, what is your oh shit moment? Everybody has one, right? Could be good, could be bad. But in your career to date, what has been that moment for you?
I mean, good wise would probably be when that first episode went viral, because I think that was a good, like, oh shit, my career might actually come to fruition right now if I do this correctly. So that was a good one. And the bad one's probably obvious, which is when our whole definition of safety on our sets changed when Adam had his accident with the RPG launcher, which is an obvious oh shit moment, but that was so maybe I should word that differently. It didn't set the standard of safety for our channel, because Adam was always the one setting the standards of safety on set. Even if it meant like, I was like, Adam, I'd really love to get this angle from this perspective, but I need to be this close to be able to trigger in this way, or I need to like maybe bounce it off a mirror or something. And he'll think about like angles and potential ricochets, and he'll be like, no, like we should probably do it from this way, and then that'll mess up my lighting angle a little bit. So like we always compromise through safety to still get interesting shots. Even if it was like mildly annoying to me, I'm like, yes, I see what you're saying, like, okay, let me rethink this. But after that, it was like, that's why we don't question the safety, because when you do, it gets like you're just done. So that, I think, solidified in my brain of like always science first, or safety first, science second, and which is, I guess, another one of our sayings. And for Adam, I'm sure just reaffirmed it even more. Like, we're not skimping on safety, like, ever. And that has meant turning down, even if it means like turning down a well-paying sponsor or whatever it might be, like we can't get that delicious shot that we wanted all day or whatever it is. Like if safety is compromised, it's just not going to happen. So that was definitely a no shit moment.
Yeah, that was an intense moment, man. I remember watching the video and being like, oh dang.
And we're approaching a year of it happening. I think we're like a week or two away from a year, which is wild that it's been that long.
Yeah, no kidding, man. That's nuts. So what are you looking forward to? What do you got coming up next? What are you excited about for the rest of the year, 2025?
So for the longest time, my answer to that question was always, I want to collide bullets, because that was in the back of my mind for years. And then we did it. I don't know. We've been collaborating with other creators a lot more, which has been super nice. like going down to Texas and meeting Brandon Herrera, doing high speed for some of his episodes, like Donut Operator, Kentucky Ballistics, like all those guys down there, meeting them and or collaborating on them has been super cool. And then we've been like we tried to collaborate with I don't know if you know who Mike Shake is. He's from Italy. He's got like a multi-million subscriber channel. He just recently built a supersonic Nerf blaster.
Oh, I think I have seen that video.
Yeah, so he actually flew out. Not a lot of people know this. He actually flew out not that long ago and shipped the supersonic blaster because he wanted to use our cameras to get an exact calculation, really verify that it's supersonic, send it into some ballistic heads or whatever, and then custom seized the package because it was like a little suspicious the way that it was packaged, and they didn't release it from customs until after he had to go back home. So we're trying to do that again in November. So that's another collaboration that may be coming up. Impact Props, they made a bulletproof like Halo helmet from the video game Halo. So we did some fun testing on that. I think they're about to release that video soon. So we just really enjoy collaborating with other creators that have similar mindsets. I'm sure not all creators are fun to collaborate with, but so far it's been really nice. So I'm excited to do more of that. Anytime we go out to SHOT Show or the range days down in Texas or whatever it is, just we're each year is amassing like tenfold the amount of contacts and friends and things like that. So it's been nice to feel like we're getting actually absorbed into the industry and accepted and even appreciated at times, because of the way that in a way we're kind of pushing the frontier of imaging this stuff. So that's been fun. So I think mainly I'm excited to keep capturing things that just flat out have not been seen before. Whether that's, how are we going to actually break a tungsten cube? Are we going to put a shape charge into it? Because sure, anyone can do that, but can you also get the camera technology to capture it at like 10 million frames per second? So I want to tread into that territory as well. And I recently had contacts with people that have Shimatsu cameras, and there's secretly a newer model coming out with maybe 20 million frames per second.
Holy cow, dude.
I don't know if I can say that. So yeah, I want to keep capturing stuff that I can say like this hasn't been seen before and present it to the world as like, look what's going on in reality around you. And I secretly wonder if someday we're going to stumble on the boundary of like the simulation of reality of like, yeah, once you look any deeper than this, reality doesn't do anything else. You see like a finite stepping of, just a weird thought.
Yeah, I wonder that too, because I just saw recently somewhere on social media there's a video. I think I was down in Louisiana recently, and I was on social media and I watched and saw that somebody had managed to create a camera that could shoot fast enough to capture light moving.
Light propagation, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Which unfortunately, after I looked into it, turns out it's not an actual camera. It's like slit photography stitched together over many, because light's very repeatable. So
yeah,
it's technically composited together, but it's still very cool because you're still ending up with what would have been an actual high-speed capture. So bridging the gap from, the millions of frames per second to the trillions, where you can start to see light travel. I'm excited to see that technology progress.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so cool about camera technology is you're still digital photography, digital videography, right, is still pretty new tech, right? And to see it be pushed, because I'm always every day it seems like I'm waking up and I'm looking on the internet. I'm like, dang, how much more can we push technology? How much further can we go? And it's cool to see that cameras are on the leading edge of some of that research, right? Being able to capture that information.
Yeah, because I don't know that there is a physical boundary of capture speed. Maybe they need to change architecture of their sensors from silicon to something else, or I don't know what it is, but it's like even going back to the Trinity tests, filming the first atomic detonations with like rotating pentaprism high-speed cameras that captured the first like nanoseconds of it. Like it's the imaging technology has been pushed ever since it existed, and it doesn't seem like it's slowing down, which is really exciting because it means I get to keep delivering faster and faster and higher quality content. So yeah, I welcome all the speed we can get.
So what it sounds like is that you guys aren't going anywhere anytime soon. It's
No.
only you're just still ramping up, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the growth of the channel itself in terms of audience size, like really doesn't matter to us a whole lot as much as it is like we both finally feel like we have our purpose in terms of we feel like we're using our brains. It's fun. Most of the time we're standing on set, like we actually make money doing this, which I'm sure Adam and Jamie felt that all the time on Mythbusters.
Oh, yeah.
So like even if our audience size plateaus right now and it never grows again, it's still like the best job we've ever had. So and the contacts we make and the research work, contract work we get outside of the channel, because now we get seen by so many people directly. So like there's some stuff for the military that I've been able to assist imaging that directly helped save people's lives out on the battlefield, because now
No kidding.
now they can suppress fire deflagrations inside of their cockpits in these certain vehicles because of the way I helped capture the suppression system. Like, so it feels like holistically like it's what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's just happy to be here now.
Dude, well that's what's up. That's awesome. I love that. Real quick, who would you recommend? Give me 3 to 5 names of who you think I should reach out to next to be on Guns and Cameras from your network.
Guns and cameras.
And or people that you could help, if you could refer. That helps too.
Yeah.
But no pressure.
I mean, ideally you want them to be both camera users and gun users, or like where in that
Yeah.
Venn diagram are you okay with?
Yeah, so I mean, I work with people, I mean, as you know, in all ends of the spectrum, right? So we're coming up here on recording 13 episodes, which is about how long I want the first season of the podcast to be before I start branching out into like, I got a behind the lens series of just creators, right? But it'd be cool to get an in front of the lens series where we talk to people who are not only camera operators but are also personalities, right? And then, I mean, we're, could be all gun people, could be all camera people. So I'm trying to diversify a little bit. So it's
Yeah.
really, who do you think would be interesting
I mean,
to,
obviously I can immediately get you in contact with Adam,
that'd be awesome.
because he now has experience with the camera side of stuff. He doesn't personally film or photograph anything really, but he obviously has that perspective on being on sets and coming from, being deployed in Africa to now being back home doing the stuff as like a public figure on the internet with high speed. Like I'm sure that's an interesting perspective that he could talk about.
Cool.
If you want an on-camera personality that doesn't have a whole lot to do with guns necessarily, have you ever seen videos, Fire Department Chronicles on TikTok? He's a firefighter. His name's Jason Patton.
Okay.
You've probably seen clips of his videos. Like he stages like responding to 911 calls, just like really goofy stuff, or like he green screens himself. He's bald.
Yeah, I have seen his stuff.
Yep, he green screens himself into like TV scenes of like firefighters doing this, and he's just like, that's not how that works.
Yeah, I have enjoyed some of
So
his
he's the co-founder of Fire Department Coffee, which is one of my clients. So
right on.
so he and I are really good friends. He does interview type stuff like this all the time for podcasts and whatnot. So
Cool.
he has a ton of stories and experience on, because he's been on large commercial sets. He's probably been in a feature film or two, but I'm filming him all the time for their commercials and stuff. So like he's on both sides of it all the time. So that might be a good contact as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could think of a couple more.
No worries. Yeah, if you think of anybody, just send them my way, or again, just tell them to reach out. No pressure. And then kind of to close this all out, Bryce, this has been awesome. So thank you for your time and for sharing your knowledge, because this is something that, again, I don't think a lot of videographers, filmmakers, unless they've really looked into it, fully understand just the level of complexity that comes from being a high-speed camera operator, right? Totally different set of problems, as you outlined, right? That requires a totally different skill set, a lot of math, understanding lighting, lenses, cameras, frame rates, all of that in order to capture, again, just data management, right, is a huge thing. I mean, to be able to, one, capturing it is one problem. Being able to store that much information is a whole nother problem. And then process it, right, computers wise. But any words of advice or wisdom that you could pass on to somebody who's either just getting started or maybe has an interest in doing, trying to move forward with high speed videography, what would you tell them that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started out?
If it's for high speed specifically, I would say to appreciate that you're now in this part of the technology curve, because companies like Chronos exist, or FreeFly, or Edgertronic. There are so many companies out there that offer more affordable solutions that are 4 figures in cost instead of 5 or 6 figures. So I would say, like, being able to jump into high speed is more accessible now than ever. It's sort of like the whole DSLR boom when that happened with like the 5D Mark II and stuff. Like when everyone was like full frame short films, like that's kind of what's happening now for high speed, that sort of technology boom. So I mean, if you're passionate about it, it's the same with most creative industries, which is just don't stop. Because like I said, I did this for 10 to 12 years before anybody cared. And then all of a sudden, lots of people care. And I get paid to do it all the time, more money than I ever thought that I would be able to. And it's only because I studied the craft and tried to perfect it for so many years until it became innate in my body. And then suddenly I'm at sort of the top of the people that even do it in the world, almost by accident, just because I liked it so much. And if you're ever wondering if that's the thing that you should be doing, I heard one time, which resounded really well with me, which is the thing that you obsessed with the most when you're like 14, 13, 15, in that age range, whatever you were obsessing with in that age range, you should be doing that for probably ever. And that was right when I picked up my first camera and was watching shows like Time Warp and thinking about like how could I combine physics and cameras and stuff. And that's when that first happened, and I started to hyperfixate on it. It was when I was like 14. Cool. So like it resounded really well with me because it's exactly what I'm doing now. And I mean, it just makes sense because like those are your most formative years mentally, figuring out like who you are, what's interesting. Don't think too much about what like your parents think you should be doing or what your school is suggesting you should go to college for or any of that. I don't have any degrees, and I know more about this stuff than most people do that did go to college for, any sort of imaging, I would say. So just think about what in your brain feels like this is the thing, and just kind of brute force a career out of it, even if it takes 10 to 12 years. Like I was working 2 daytime jobs while trying to do this stuff at the same time. Like I'm working at Menards on a forklift while I'm emailing back trying to get my first loan for a Phantom. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, just do what you have to do to make it happen. Because 10 years is going to go by either way, and you're either going to be, working in a factory or whatever, or doing exactly what you want to be doing. So time doesn't stop. As hard as I try to make it stop, it just doesn't. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great advice. Holy smokes. Bryce, thank you so much for being on this episode of Guns and Cameras. I can't wait to see what you make next. I will for sure be watching the Flintlock episode. Can't wait for that. That's going to be awesome.
Yep, should be out on Halloween Day. So before this goes up, I would assume. So yeah.
So it'll be past tense, but if y'all don't know about it, be sure to go check out Ballistic High Speed on YouTube. Give them a subscribe, check the bell, do all the stuff with YouTube.
Trying to hit 1 million by the end of the year.
Well, help them with that goal. Get on there and help them hit 1 million by the end of the year. Also, you can find them on Instagram. Look for, what is it? B Fritzel 3.14.
Yeah, that one's got. If you look,
a better one? Should we go to Ballistic High Speed?
I mean, yeah, if that's the stuff you want, Ballistic High Speed has its own Instagram. That's got like, maybe 30-some thousand followers. My personal one is just random nonsense that I do. Like just the other day I had to fix my washing machine because the little agitator teeth wouldn't engage. So I was filming it in high speed to figure out how to get it to engage better. Just random stuff like that.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so go find his personal one, follow him, and give him a message. Tell him how much you love his work, because we always like hearing good, positive feedback. Also, go to Ballistic High Speed on Instagram, follow them. Just keep tabs on everything that they're doing. Bryce, I appreciate your time. Yeah, I look forward to catching up with you maybe sometime at SHOT Show. We'll be down there. Yeah, man. One last thing. If people want to work with you or get a hold of you, if they're interested in shooting some high-speed footage and they have a budget, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, 2 different emails. One for the channel, bryce@ballistichighspeed.com. That'll get you in touch with me and Adam. And so whether you want to like sponsor your product or, you know, just have a crazy idea for the channel, that's a good one to hit up. Or if you're a research company, you need me to come figure out why your assembly line's breaking or why your bullet isn't doing this certain thing, there's bryce@renthighspeed.com, which is that URL, renthighspeed.com. That's where kind of all these cameras live and travel as a technician with them and stuff like that. So either way, reach out and hopefully we can capture some stuff and solve some problems.
That sounds awesome. Guys, thanks for watching. This has been Guns and Cameras with Bryce Fritzel from Ballistic High Speed. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.
Thanks so much.
All right, guys, that is it for this week's episode of Guns and Cameras with Mr. Bryce Fritzel, aka B Fritzel 3.14.
Yes.
Also at Ballistic High Speed.
Can't tell I like math. That's
oh, yeah.
pie.
Oh yeah, it's a pie. But I want to say a huge thank you to Bryce for being on this show. Also stoked that we had to have him be the first like in-person cameo for the podcast. So stoked for that. Bryce, you got any final words for our audience?
If you like slow motion guns, Ballistic High Speed, feel free to subscribe on YouTube. Yeah, there's a whole lot of guns here too. So I think I'm gonna head over there and shoot some stuff. I've got some Phantoms with me. I might whip those out later. But yeah, that was a really fun interview. Thanks again for having me.
Bryce,
appreciate it.
Sir. Yeah, thanks guys for watching. Stay tuned. We got some really cool stuff in the works, so be sure to look for more. That being said, let's go shoot some guns, Bryce.
Let's do it, brother.
All right, we're going this way.
Yeah.
Have a good day, guys.